mange på Litteraturhuset i Fredrikstad med titlen Menneskets, desperasjon. Jeg heter Bernhard Ellefsen og har fått gleden av å lede denne samtalen i kveld. Og allerede nå så bytter jeg til engelsk ut av høflighet for vår gjest, som jeg snart skal presentere. Yes, the novel we're looking at tonight, The Raft of the Medusa, is truly a literary work of emergency. This wonderful Norwegian translation of the book by Ute Neumann was published in 2019, and it was met with both critical and popular acclaim. On the cover of my Norwegian edition of the novel, it is described as an allegory of human nature, not only once, but twice. In the 21st century, emergency is, of course, a permanent state. But right now, in the middle of a global pandemic with the ecological catastrophe looming, it seems like an especially good time to read and discuss this novel. And we're honored to have Franzobel joining us by video link from Vienna to do so. He is the author of more than 50 books, and he has also worked as a painter and an illustrator. Mr. Franzobel, welcome. We have to start with the story of this book. It's truly spectacular, and it's inspired by real events. It's 1816, and the ship Medusa leaves Europe for the west coast of Africa as part of a small fleet. 400 people are aboard, and the ship's captain is a nobleman without any real experience as a seafarer. I was wondering if you could start just by telling us a little bit about this ship and what happens to it, and set the scene for us somewhat.
Yeah, the story starts at Rochefort. It's on the west coast of France, and they want to get the Senegal back as a colony. The French people lost it on the Napoleon War, and in 1815 they got the Senegal back, and then they started with 4 ships to go to the Senegal, to Saint Louis, which was the capital at this time from the Senegal. And because the captain, Chaumaret called, had never was a captain in the time before. He was a aristocrat. He escaped after the revolution in France, 1789, to England, and then he came back and said to the government, I all the time I was a royalist, and I was a very brave aristocrat, and give me a good job. And so they gave him this commandatur, this captain posten.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely unable to make this, and so he didn't how would I say it? Hear to all the people who said that there could be a danger. There are some sandbanks in front of the Senegal, and he was too very proud, very special. And
Yeah.
so the ship came on a sandbank, and they tried to came off from the sandbank, but it wasn't really possible. They had two
attempts to
attempts. First they built a very small raft with the anchor, and they put the anchor 200 meters before to pull it down the ship. Is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit bumpy, sorry, but it doesn't really work. On the next day they did it again, and the ship came from the sandbank, and just at this moment where the people thought, okay, we are free, we managed this problem, a big wave came and put the ship again to the sandbank, and then they built the raft from all the masts and the raft, all this this wood on the ship. And on this raft, because they had not enough boats, rettungsboote.
Yeah, because it's quite a colorful group of people on the boat, right? And we get to this stage where the boat filled with people, with aristocrats, officers, soldiers, regular passengers, people who are trying to start business in Senegal. All of them are there. The ship is stranded on this Argin bank, this large sandbank on the coast of Senegal, and they have lifeboats for 250 people out of 400 or something like that. And the scene turns. It was already chaotic on the boat, we might say, but it turns into a real chaos when they try to evacuate the boat.
Yeah. Because the people who were in the hierarchy not on the top, they had to go to the raft. And on the raft, they put 150 people, around 150 people, and the raft had a dimension of 7 to 20 meters, and so for every man on the raft, you have half a quadrat meter.
Yeah.
It was very, very crowded there, and the people got into their belly belt into the water. Because of their weight, and they told them, you have not to be afraid, because we make a line with all the lifeboats and bring you to the land, but this doesn't work, and they cut the rope.
Yeah. This was kind of a disgraceful scene from the start. The captain wasn't in sea law at that time. The captain was supposed to leave the ship last, right? Our friend on this ship, he leaves quite early.
Yeah, he was one of the first.
Yeah, and they got in lifeboats and tried to tow this raft to the coast, but they gave up quite early and cut them off. So this raft with 150 people on a really small space and with water up to their waist, they were at sea. Free at sea, with almost no food, nothing to drink, right?
Not very much to drink, yeah. And they thought it's not possible for anyone to survive. But they were very surprised that from these 115 people, 15 survived. Yeah. And then the French Admiralty didn't want to hear about this story, because it was a big blame for them.
This is the center of the novel. It has a long prelude, and the story continues, but what happens on this raft, that's kind of the heart of the book, and that's also the title of the book. One of the characters calls it an experiment, and there is a lot of reflection and thinking and discussion about human nature. And what happens with the what's exposed in the human nature in an emergency like this, in deep distress? Can you tell us a little bit about how this unfolds, how these 150 people start out and end up as 15 alive?
Yeah, the people didn't thought that they will survive, and they knew that there will no judgment about what they are doing in this time, and it's a very close community, and they thought that they will survive 1 day, 2 days or so, and so for me, what's a surprise that they started very early with cannibalism to eat the dead bodies, and it was when they had a big discussion: should we do it or should we not do it? And at the time where they decided to do it, or some of them decided, came a swarm of flying fishes on the raft, and then they mixed the dead bodies of the human with these fishes, and make with gunpowder they had on the top of the mast a kind of stew maybe, and so everybody ate of this strange stew.
Yeah, because cannibalism is, of course, the ultimate taboo that is broken on this raft. But almost every other taboo is broken as well. If this is if this is human nature, then it's a bleak picture, I would say. The suicides come early, then they start killing each other. There's enormous amounts of violence. At least 2 major outbreaks of fighting on the raft. There is capital punishment for sneaking up on the wine barrel. Every taboo is broken here, really.
Yeah. I think it's the seed of the humanity. Maybe when we have no moral, no judgment, then we are nearby to the animals. And in every human being is this seed, I guess.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that, of course. In this novel, you have obviously creatively filled in the blanks in the story, so to speak. I don't. It's described in contemporary sources, but I haven't read the contemporary sources. But you seem quite faithful to the story. At least I can't see that the encyclopedia entries differs very much from your story. How have you used the real events, and how much of it, and what have you added, or how did you work with that?
Yeah, I try to read everything what I can get. I read a lot of books. There are this documentary of 2 survivors of the Savigny-Korea, and I read this, of course. And then I two more documentaries. Sorry. And then I tried to read everything what I could get, and I looked at a lot of movies and read a lot of books, and after all this investigation, I didn't know what really happened and what's my imagination. Sometimes I can't say, is it a fantasy of mine, or is it really?
We can, before we go on with the contemporary sources, you mentioned one of the most fascinating characters. He's the ship doctor. He's the second ship doctor, Dr. Savigny. He is one of maybe 2 recent voices on this ship, and that says a lot. There's 400 people there. He is kind of a Dr. Frankenstein, but also and more an Enlightenment philosopher. He's a Democrat. He represents a kind of contrast to the complete collapse of culture and civilization on this ship. Can you tell us a little bit about Dr. Savigny and his worldview, really?
Yeah, he was well educated, and for me it was important to have such a figure, which is from this Aufklärung, this humanity stuff, and he is a type of a new mankind, but he wasn't able to make anything against this violence and brutalism. And for me it was very important to have such a figure.
But his Enlightenment mind mostly survives. The question is posed many times in the book. What would the Enlightenment philosophers do in this situation? How would the democracy survive such an emergency? Dr. Savigny, he is maybe the only character that comes out more or less with the same values as he went into this.
He and also the Victor.
Yeah, we're going to talk about him too. Obviously, he's a very important character.
It was his adventure of Savigny, but he's a different character. Maybe good and maybe not.
And Savigny is also the writer behind one of the big contemporary books about this story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah. He and the Geographic Korea Code wrote this documentary, and the captain in Senegal didn't want to read about this because the documentary of the captain is absolutely different to the documentary of Savigny. And Savigny and Korea had an escape from Saint Louis to back to France very close after their surviving, and they gave it to the maritime people and of France, and they didn't want to read about this. They said, okay, it's not for the public, and only because of an indiscretion,
Indiscreet.
it's gone public, and it was published by a lot of newspaper at this time in Europe. I think every newspaper published this documentary.
Yeah, and it created a scandal, of course, and quite a sensational history. And that, I would think, is what inspired the first major work of art about this event, and that was a painting that shares the title with your book. It's by Théodore Géricault. It's from 1818-19. It hangs in the Louvre. You told me earlier that it's a huge painting, and it also is on the cover of your book. Can you tell us a little bit about this very influential and large painting, and what kind of story that tells? And have you used that painting? I see some similarities in a way between that painting and your book. It's maybe in the coloring and in the attention to detail, but Géricault, he's not funny. Your book is funny, so that's a difference. But how did you use the painting? What do you think about it?
I never heard about this painting till I wrote the story. I knew the painting from a music album cover from the Poach, the Irish punk folk band, and also from the Asterix, the comic.
That's a great source of knowledge for us all.
Yeah, and a lot of advertisements is using this picture, but I never knew that it's hanging in the Louvre. But I was fascinated of the painting, of course. It's a very similar or it make a new art of painting maybe at this time, because you are when you see this picture, you are on the raft, as you are, and the people there here it is. They are you see the people on the raft. They're making a pyramid. On the top of the pyramid is a mystique, or a black one, which was very uncommon. It was a little scandal at this time, and they are looking at the ship, which is bringing their which is ihre Rettung. This ship is find the last 15 one. And my novel is starting at the other, from the other perspective. I'm starting at this small ship. You will not see it because it's very, very small and at the horizon. And so the picture and the book are corresponding in a while, and I tried to make a similar thing in literature, like Géricault made as a painter.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because this is a very visceral painting. It's immersive. You can really see the bodies and the suffering, and it's a very dramatic picture, and it's dark in color. It's has almost this kind of gothic feel. That seems like something you have transposed on the book as well. The book is linguistically, stylistically very inventive. It's enormously energetic. It's fast-paced. And it's dark. The mood here is somewhat similar, I think.
Yeah, but as you're told, you can, when you read my book, you can laugh maybe
Yeah,
sometimes.
that was the big difference. I laughed a lot.
Yeah, because that's necessary for me, because I could write it that you think after 20 pages, okay, that's so scandalous, it's so ugly. I don't want to read it till the end. But that's the carrot for the donkey.
Yeah, but I'm a good donkey, so I took the carrot, and it did something else for me too, because we're talking about this as I said, it's presented on the cover in blurbs as an allegory of human nature and everything. It could seem like a very one-sided allegory, a very Hobbesian view of the world and of human nature. It's almost completely bleak, but Savigny is here. But you know, in The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, you have Nafta and Settembrini fighting it out, light and darkness. To me, the comedy here, the humor, the language, the energy in the book is kind of the light. It's not in the story, the light, but it's in the language and in the form and in the energy you have written it with. That's kind of the opposition to the dark image of human nature somehow.
Yeah. What's new in my novel is that the storyteller is in the present. He's in the 20th century, 21st century.
Yeah.
And normally in historic novels, you have the storyteller at the time which is telling, in the 18th century or something, sometimes else. So I have the possibility to have more perspectives. I have the inner monologue of the people, which are of the figures, and I also have this storyteller, which is like a total in the movie maybe. So I have a lot of camera perspectives.
Yeah. We should say also that this is a kind of a radical move in the book, because it's really anachronistic in that way. The characters can be compared with Arnold Schwarzenegger, or something on the ship can be compared to something that happened 10 years ago. You work with this tension between now and then, and you use it for fun, it seems, but also to me it reinforces the allegorical potential of the book. It reminds me that this isn't just happening then, and it's something distant. It reminds me that this fucked up world is mine too.
Yeah. When I started, I tried to imitate the speech or the language of this time, but it didn't happen for me. And one of the motivation to write this book maybe was the situation of the refugees in the Mediterranean Sea, with, I don't know, 5,000 victims every year. It was I was very shocked about this. And the stories are also in a relationship. The people on the Medusas tried to come to Africa and bring them civilization, and now we have the diametral situation, but also on the Mediterranean Sea. And so it's I never speak in the book about the refugees, but every reader is thinking about them, I guess, or I heard from the audience.
Yeah, because that's the concrete and direct scene, right? A raft lost, drifting at sea, and if we stick with the historical situation for just a few more moments, this is the year 1816. That's a very special year in the world history. It's usually called the year without summer. It's one of the most doom and gloomy years of all time. Can you say a little bit about that and how that may feed into the book?
Yeah, there was a big volcano eruption in Indonesia, 1815, and 1 year later they had this year without the summer. There was a lot of rain, no harvest. People were starving. They had nothing to eat, and a lot of people are mm, tried to immigrate, to go to America or somewhere else. And there also was a time where a lot of religious fanatics came out because of the starving, because they thought it was a, a sign of God because of all these things in the world. And yeah, that's an interesting time.
It's an interesting part of the backdrop, I think, also because, as you say, this year it also led to refugee crisis and hunger and disaster in Europe and all around the world, really. But it's also in literary history a very interesting year because, as you mentioned in the book, this is the year that a few friends met around a lake in Switzerland, and they were there to swim and to sunbathe, I guess. But it rained all summer, so they stayed out instead and wrote books. And they wrote Dracula and Frankenstein. And these are also books that are in a fantastical manner examining human nature. I thought that was a kind of interesting echo in your book.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's a special year.
Frankenstein was created in this time, yeah, in this summer, yeah.
As you said, the ship, there is a lot of doom in the air, and the ship is constantly warning its passengers that something bad is going to happen. The passengers that we are closest to, they can hear the ship talk, they can hear the ship warn them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's imagination for me. I find it very interesting. But they didn't know what's happened. The ship was on this sandbank, of this Arguin sandbank, and of course there was water inside on the unterdeck, on the keller of the ship. And they were afraid that every moment the ship could burst and they sink, and they were really afraid, and so they built this raft.
But they wouldn't listen to the warnings. No one listened to the warnings.
No,
That seems also like a very human trait. We get warnings all the time, but we refuse to hear them.
Yeah, that's right.
You mentioned earlier that the people aboard this ship, they were there. They thought they were carrying civilization to an uncivilized continent. They were there to recolonize the French West Africa. But that's an interesting paradox. These people doesn't seem to me very civilized. There's kind of a dark paradox in what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a problem of the most of the conquerors of the world.
Obviously, but you talked earlier about kind of a circle here, that the crisis you were writing under, or in partially in response to, is a migration crisis out of Africa and in a post-colonial situation. But these are the colonizers, and they are a terrible group of people, and a comical group of people, farcical even. But their self-image is still that they're representing. They're very taken up by this, right? They're always talking about their clothes, their hierarchy, their ranks, their who's more important than the other ones, what they're gonna do in Africa. Can you talk a little bit about that in the book? Because this is really played out as a drama on the ship. Their self-image, their self-understanding, and what they're there to do.
Yeah, I think you will find it in every time that the colonizers are proud, and they think that they are better humans, but they aren't. My last book is about the conquerors from the Spanish conquerors in South of America, and they were the same. They were very brutal. They had no interest for the religious or for the knowledge of the indigenous people. and they killed them, to hundreds of them or thousands of them, and so you find similar situations that I think at every century of the last of 1,000 years, and that's very sad for me, of course.
But it's these people who are part of the experiment on the raft. It's their culture, their supposedly advanced culture, that's tested
Yeah,
in this experiment on the raft.
yeah, they were French people, a little bit proud of it.
Some of them are very proud of it. It's this one guy is always going on about the greatness of France. Is commenting every tragedy with the greatness of France.
Yeah, he's a nationalist or racist.
But can you say something more about why this? Because these kinds of situations have fascinated us always. Stranded on a desert island, plane crash in the Andes, or the story that inspired Moby Dick, the whale ship that was attacked by a whale, and they were in the middle of the Pacific on the USS Essex, and they had to row to the coast. They were 2 months at sea, and they, of course, also ate each other. But can you say a little bit more about why you were so fascinated about this situation, this kind of emergency?
No, it's hard to say. I was absolutely flashed by the story. I heard about the story, and I knew it. And at this time, I have to write the story. I don't know why. It's like to fall in love in the other person. I was absolutely flashed. I knew it. I have to write it, but I can't say why. I had no moralic implications, or I didn't want to judge about the people they were in this situation, or I have no moralic which things I want to say to the readers, or not too much. I just was fascinated from the story, from this close community on the raft. It's like a close community, like in Sartre, die geschlossene Gesellschaft. Yeah, it was. In Austria, we have no sea. It was a very strange topic for me. I'm not really able to speak French. It was, I don't know, it was 200 years ago, but I was absolutely in this story when I heard it. And I had to write it.
You say there is no morale to the story, and that's one of the best parts of it. I think it's a really close portrait of what happens on the raft, and what happens on the ship, and what happens when many people survive, and they go on to Senegal and back to France, as you said. But you go really close, and you try to expose them, warts and all, but with a importantly comical dimension. This close-up technique, the will to just look at them for a long time and close, that seems like an important part of the motivation.
Yeah, the story needs this closeness, otherwise it wouldn't work, I guess.
One of the yeah.
Oh no.
One of the you mentioned the other important character, Victor. He's a young man. He's kind of the Ishmael of this story, if we stick with the Moby Dick parallel. He is a human. He's a person, and he is also victimized. So he's the one victim here. Can you say who is Victor, and how does he meet the ship, and what happens to him?
Yeah, the most of the people in the novel are historically persons. We don't know too much about them. We know about their professions, about their age, but nothing about the characters. But I needed one person for the reader to identify with him. And this for me is Victor. It's an imagination. He's not on the list of the survivors. And as a reader, you can, identify with this Victor. But I had the problem that he's not on the list of the survivors, and how I should manage it that the reader is not too sad that he will not survive or survive.
Do you think every reader reads the book with the list of the survivors next to the book on their desk? You would have gotten away with it anyway.
Maybe.
No, but
no, with Google, it's quite easy to find this.
Victor is he comes from an aristocratic family. He has run away, so he has memories of a safe, comfortable, but also constrained life. Right? He seeks adventure and liberty, but he is, I would say, gruesomely disappointed with the life aboard the ship. He meets a very violent society.
Yeah. This was very important for me to show how the society at this time was a class society. That you had the upper class and you have the proletarians, the plebeians, the people who had no value because there was a lot of Leibstrafen. I don't know how it called in English. Leibstrafen, a lot of torture for them because they had no value, and so that in the last 200 years we made that the humanity or the society is became a little bit better.
But at the same time, this, if we put this into the context I started with as a book about emergency and human distress and what we do under distress, it sets out or paints a picture where there are some cultural safeguards. We can create some measures of civilization. We can try to create structures of democracy or solidarity or community or things like that would make it possible to avoid the kind of chaos of violence that emerges on the raft. But there are no guarantees, right? Savigny is there, he tries. There are a few honorable officers of the military, they try. And we know of situations like this in history where it goes better than this. But we also know that there is no guarantee, like the Lord of the Flies can always appear anywhere. Can you think a little bit loud about how that plays out in this book? Because that's the edge on which the novel balances and finds itself.
We had the Balkan War 30 years ago. We had this brutal war in Rwanda, and we are never sure that normal people, well educated, living in a prosperity society, from one day to another, they find a Sündenbock. I don't know the English word now.
Scapegoat.
And brutal as the Nazis were, and it's possible in every society, I guess, and that's why we have to be very careful with our education, with our humanity. It's not so strong as we think.
And in this book, you obviously, as we have discussed, you explore the consequences. And one of the things that the book does is to expose and explore the violence. It's really, with the painting we started with, it describes violence and and the human evil, really, in great detail and with great curiosity too. I might add. Why is that important to look closely at the violence?
Yeah, it's a kind of catharsis. Is it the English word catharsis?
Yeah.
To feel with the people. It's for me. It's necessary. As a writer, I have to write close. If not, it would be only a historical book, but not a novel. It's the challenge of a novel, maybe to be very close in this story. It's my style of writing, maybe.
There's also, to me, as I read it, I also felt a kind of a theme of hubris in the story about this ship. Again, maybe with a slight echo of Moby Dick in mind. There's no respect for the sea among the captain and his very eccentric assistant. He's just a passenger who's enlisted to be this weak captain's assistant, and who really takes control of the ship. Can you just say who he is? He's a really fascinating character. This friend of the captain's who shows up and bosses everybody around.
Yeah. He's a Hochstapler, we call it in German. I don't know. He's what was fascinated an historical person, and as he is in the novel, he was in reality. He was speaking. He was a very, very proud. He thought he knew everything, and the captain believed him. And so we had this person, maybe like a little bit like Donald Trump, who was
he's a trickster.
Person, absolutely a hubris on two legs.
Yeah,
and he was the reason for all the catastrophic things.
Yeah, and he also kind of organizes his hubris because this is a ship. It's at sea. It's a dangerous journey that they're on. This bank has been the scene of many a shipwreck before. The social and the social structures on the ship take up everything of their attention. They have no eye for the nature that they're in. So that was what I was thinking about, is that this isn't just about human nature. It's about nature as well, and the hubris of humans in nature, because they're completely ignorant to everything that happens around them. These people.
Yeah. The ship is maybe a metaphoric society of the world. You have every class, and it's typically for a lot of societies. And
yeah, it feels like a microcosm, and also when the ship tries to warn them in this track in the novel, that I of course understand is fiction, because it's kind of a magical thing, the ship whispering to its passengers. But when this ship feels like a microcosm of the planet or of the world, really, these warnings and the passengers' rejection of them feels also like something we know.
Yeah, you can read it as a metaphor for the mankind and for the earth, maybe.
But you actually can. That's usually a terrible thing to say about a novel, but it's not a terrible thing to say about this one, because it's done with really a lot of playfulness. But as I said, if we read it as an allegory, then, or maybe better as a portrait of human nature, when the culture is stripped away, it paints a bleak picture, as I said. I was wondering what do you think about this story after writing about it, reading a lot, being immersed in it, this kind of eruption of human terror. you're obviously able to laugh at it as well, because you've written about it with lightness and darkness. But what did you think about this story, and how do you feel about it afterwards, when you've probably spent years immersed in it?
Cool. That's a hard question. A novel is for me like a child. Maybe it's I love it, but I have to let it go to the public, to the audience. It's like a child which is coming to the school, and teachers are saying, okay, he's good there and not so good there, and yeah, I have to let it go.
But does it, when you were writing this and you were in your office or wherever you're writing, and and you were spending your day with these people, and you went out on the street and you saw other people, I would think it's hard not to see a potential raft passenger on the sidewalk.
Yeah, sometimes I take some people on the street for visual some figures. But I like to write, or normally I write in bed. And when I wrote this book, I was in a big bed, and around me was a lot of books, and I felt like on the raft. The bed was my raft because normally I write when I'm like in this situation with a laptop.
It's hard to wrap up this book, because it's very polyphonic and it says a lot of things. But as I mentioned in my short introduction, it feels relevant to, as you said, it's written out of the, more or less, or inspired by, triggered by the refugee crisis of 2015-16. This kind of story feels like it speaks to this situation, to this moment. Do you feel like that? As you said, you took this story at that particular moment.
Yeah, I was shocked about the situation of the refugees in the Mediterranean Sea. But of course, when I wrote the book, I was in the story of the book mainly, but it was a relationship, of course, because it's for me I can't, I don't know, it's so incredible what's going on there at the sea, and Europe is so rich, and people are heavy. Didn't know should they buy a new car, a new apartment, or making holidays. Don't know, with the Maldives or anywhere, and there are people getting drawn in the Mediterranean Sea. It's so close to us, and we don't do anything against this, and that's and we also have this guilty of the colonialism, and it's a very double-bind situation, I guess.
Thank you so much. I can't recommend this book enough. It was a great read again, and as I said, the Norwegian translation is really good. Congratulations on that. It's really an inventive and precise translation by Ute Neumann. Thank you, Mr. Franzobel. I'm going to switch to Norwegian now again. Tusen takk for at dere ville bruke en vårsommerkveld, som det vel fortsatt er, på dette lille videoarrangementet. Og velkommen tilbake til flere her på Litteraturhuset i Fredrikstad. Nå er det jo også snart mulig med fysiske arrangementer, forhåpentligvis. Kanskje allerede neste uke, fingre krysset. Tusen takk for i kveld, og takk til Franzobel. Thank you again.
Thank you. And sorry for my English.